All right, we covered the first 5 sections of the book of Joshua. 5 chapters, I should say. The first 5 chapters of the book of Joshua, and that's the section on entering into the land. So, as they entered the land, they came in, of course, from the east, right? They came in from the east, and they're going to split the land of Canaan. They have the Southern Confederacy, yeah, that'd be the right word for it. And then you have the northern cities that also team up against Joshua. So, well, anyway, so this entering of the land, of course, Rahab and at Jericho. I mentioned the walls that I saw. You can see about a 20-foot section, and it's maybe 5-6 feet tall, that has been reconstructed. And those who reconstructed that were, what's his name? Bryant Wood and Associates for Biblical Research. Their team did that. And they believe they've identified that place. So back to what we were saying the other class period, I believe. We were just briefly talking about the pottery. Kathleen Kenyon said that there was no evidence of the certain kind of pottery that should have been there at the time of 1406 BC, 1400 BC. And so when Bryant Wood and came along later and others, they identified the same stuff. They took the same pieces of pottery. They took the same evidence, and they identified it differently. So, see, that's the thing in archaeology. It's not on what you see, it's how you interpret what you see. So, and I've studied a lot about archaeology and things, and one of the best ways to identify how old something is not by radiocarbon dating methods or anything like that. That's very unreliable. They've taken very recent events in our American history, very recent, last few years. They did radiocarbon dating on it, and they found the things to be thousands of years old. You understand what I mean by that? So, like the Mount St. Helens, when that blew its lid, 1979, early 80s, they did testing there, and it was very old. Well, we know it wasn't old. That was there just 40 years ago. So, that's a very unreliable dating method. The most reliable dating method that they've discovered is by studying pottery, because everywhere in the ancient world they had pottery, and so there were certain kinds of pottery that came from Crete to Canaan. There were certain kinds of pottery that came from further east to Canaan, and they can figure out when those times are. And so if you like to study that kind of stuff, which I don't like pottery, I don't like drawing and all that kind of stuff. My kids do. And my wife does some, but I don't care for it. But anyway, so if you like that kind of stuff, they take all the different kinds of, just the rim of the jar will have a different type of a look in 1400 BC than it would in 1000 BC, and typically that type of stuff. So how would they, if somebody came in 1,000 years from now, came here, how would they identify the place? How would they identify? What do you think? I'm just trying to get you to think. Yes? Sorry, the next guy. Huh? Books. All right. Have we found books from the ancient world? Yes. Not our books, but tablets. What else?
I think if we were all buried in a cataclysmic event, they'd find lots of weird brick things that are made out of glass and metal.
Yeah. Okay. Very much so, I guess. They'd probably find melted hard drives, and who knows what all they'd find.
They might even say they were used for religious purposes.
Every time they find a hole in the ground, and they say that was used for an ancient ceremonial cleansing. I'm like, okay, it looks like a hole in the ground to me, but oh well. Yeah. So anyway, so it's always, the issue is not what they see. They see the same things. It's how you interpret what you see. And so Kathleen Kenyon had an agenda, I believe. She did not. She was biased. She did not believe the Bible. She was not a Bible believer. And so she found these things and she said, there's no way this can. And then Bryant Wood comes along and he is a Bible believer. And he says, well, the Bible says that the walls fell out. And so the evidence shows that. The Bible says that it was in the harvest time at Jericho. And they have found containers with food, grain, seeds in them, and so on. So he's biased for the Bible. You say, well, he's not allowed to be biased for the Bible. Well, if you're going to say that, then she's not allowed to be biased against the Bible. So what do they always say? We're all biased. The question is not whether you have a bias. The question is, what? Which bias is the best bias to be biased about? You ever heard that before? Ken Ham or Hovind or one of those guys says that a lot in his creation studies. The question is, which bias is the best bias to be biased about? And I think we have the best bias because we're pro-Bible. Okay? Everybody understand that? So, by the way, we have lots of evidence. So, we have evidence. Right? You know what the Bible says? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So yes, I have faith, and that's not a blind faith or a dumb faith. There's that word dummy again. Whew. But a real faith that has evidence to back it up. Okay, so please do now go to Joshua chapter 6. Let's go to the second portion of Joshua, overcoming the land. Roman numeral 2. So we had them entering into the land. Now let's talk about overcoming the land. Joshua chapter 6. All right. Now Jericho was straightly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, none came in. So here, of course, we're going to see this, the three-pronged attack. You remember that. Three-pronged attack that would take the central campaign and then the southern and then the northern. So I asked a question, I believe, on the test, something along the lines of generally what was the plan of attack by Joshua in taking the land of Canaan? And that's the answer, that he would split it, take the south, and then take the north. So make sure you're understanding that. First of all, underneath overcoming the land, let's just divide it into these three categories. The central campaign. The central campaign. And, of course, that's going to start with Jericho. And then we say Ai, but that's really not the right way to say it. It's I. In Genesis, when Abraham first comes into the land, the Bible says there, I think it's chapter 12, when he first comes into the land, he goes to Bethel, which is over against, and the word there is Hai, but it's the same word. It's I. The H is a silent sound there. But this is the same city. It's Ai, which is right across the hill from Bethel. Anyway, so there's Jericho, then Ai, of course, the Gibeonites, and so on. Anyway, so that's this. And it mostly takes place right in here, okay, right in this side. They don't go all the way to the Mediterranean. It just takes place at Jericho and then on up a little further. So I should have brought pictures. I'll see you after our break. I'll see if I can show you some pictures of Jericho. So the central campaign, first is Jericho. Let's just point out some things. This is, I think, the triumph of faith in their conquest at Jericho. Joshua orders everyone to march around the city, of course, and they obeyed in detail. This is obedience at its finest. Perfect obedience. You march around, everybody shut their mouth, don't say a thing. Well, what did they do with the little kids who might have shouted out? Did they put them in the nursery? Help me out a little bit. Somebody else other than him. Yes.
Did they leave him at Gilgal?
They left him at Gilgal. Very good. They weren't there. So who was marching around the city?
The man.
Right, the soldiers. Yeah, let's not kid ourselves. This isn't everybody. This isn't the women and children. This is the soldiers. This is the army. So approximately how many soldiers do they have? Approximately 100,000. How many? Do you remember the numbering? Right at the end of the book of Numbers, they had 601,000 soldiers. So 600,000. And they're marching around this city. So remember I said last week that if you took our lake, a 3/4 mile around the lake, that's pretty reasonable that would be about the size of their march around Jericho. And it would take you, ladies, the guys run, but the ladies walk sometimes around the lake. And how long would that take you? 15 minutes, I think somebody said. Right? So that's about how long it takes. So how many people, let's say that we had 600,000 people marching around our lake. Right? So they wouldn't be marching in single file, of course. They might have 4 wide or 8 wide or 10 wide all the way around. And they just march. Okay, so anyway, day after day after day, 7 days in a row, 7 times on the 7th day. And then the walls came tumbling down because Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Fought the battle. They had patience, obedience, patience. They had faith. Well, their patience, God could have knocked those down the first day, but he didn't. He made them keep at it. And they had patience. They had faith, as I mentioned. They trusted God for the impossible. Some have tried to figure out a physical method that God used to knock down the walls of Jericho. So maybe all the stomping of the feet weakened the foundations of the walls. And then that's why they did it day after day after day. It got weaker and weaker and finally it just collapsed. Likely story? Yeah. Sure, right? So, no, obviously not. Any others? Anyway, they wouldn't have walked right up against the city either. They had walked far enough away from the city that they could have not been, had spears and things thrown at them or rocks or whatever. So, all right, so those are some important things there about Jericho. Once the walls came down, they all went straight up, every man before him. So let's see where it says that. Verse 16, 17, 18, 20. So the people shouted when the priest blew at the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him. So they just all, from wherever they were able to converge on the city. The walls created a ramp, and they were able to go up on top of that city. And so there was one section of the wall that was remaining standing, of course, Rahab's house. Now, most people believe that there were actually, around the city of Jericho, that there were actually 2 walls, like a double wall casement. Okay, so it would, and this does seem to make a lot of sense, that the inner wall collapsed and created a ramp literally all the way down, and that's why the Bible says that her house was in the wall or between the wall, because there's definitely evidence at Jericho of 2 walls, and they believe those to be simultaneous to each. In other words, that they were there at the same time. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and they try to figure that out. This group that I mentioned, archaeological group, they have made Jericho their baby. I mean, everything's about Jericho to them. And so I have a number of their videos, and they've done a lot of lessons on stuff about Jericho. So they call this the second great battle for Jericho. because that's what it really is. The first one is fought by Joshua. The second one then is fought by advanced associates of biblical research who are trying to prove that to be the place again and defend the Bible narrative, which the others don't like to defend. Okay, so they go up into the city and they utterly destroyed all that was in the city. Man, woman, young, old, ox, sheep, ass at the edge of the sword. Is that a good idea for God to send all the people in there and just say, go kill everybody? Was God, I know it's a dumb way to ask it, but was God justified in doing that? Or would we just simply chalk this up to the sovereign nature of God, that God can do as he pleases? He sets up and destroys at his own will. Of course, I believe there's a whole other twist of that, that man also has a free will. But any thoughts? Ben?
Yeah, God had given them a chance when the children of Israel were in the wilderness and stuff like that, maybe, and that they didn't. They just kept getting worse and worse, and like it's meant that get them out of it.
Okay. So God had given them a chance. That is very true. Genesis, with Abraham, he already said there he's going to start giving them a chance. He said, when it puts in Genesis chapter 13, I think it is, that Abraham, you're going to be a stranger in a land that's not yours, 430 years, until the iniquity of the Amorites is full. And that's the way it puts it. So the Amorites are part of the Canaanites. That iniquity would be filled up, and then God says enough, and he wipes them out. Another very strong argument, I think, is, could they have gotten saved if they chose to? Right? Yeah. They could have. Rahab did. So they can be, in her household, it wasn't just her, it was her entire household. So if one of these Canaanites would have wanted to be saved, wanted to believe on the name of God, they could have been saved and been spared. What about the little children? Is God just in destroying little innocent, poor children? Ripping them from the arms of their mother and... What do you think?
If the children would have lived, they probably would have just turned out to be, how bad.
Sure, right? So, I don't have a good answer for that one, but that's certainly the case. Yes, Brian?
Perhaps the children would have remembered what the Israelites had done to their city and would have
sure
regret and stuff.
Well, yeah, true. Well, but either way, the children, if you're trying to find some good out of this, the children, that were infants did go to heaven and so on. And I know that's not the proper way to look at it, but if we're going to try to find some good that came out of this. All right, so that's Jericho. Any of you ever seen pictures of Jericho? I did. I'll try to show you a few a little bit later. So Jericho. Next, Ai, chapter 7, 8, and 9. Ai is the next place where they marched to. Boy, they were confident after Jericho. Man, that was fun. We didn't have to do much. Go in there and everything falls down and we just take it over and kill everybody and move on. Well, that wasn't quite that simple, but now they send a small group in chapter 7 of about 2,000 to 3,000. Send those to Ai, and they're going to, they think, take this little city. We don't need many here. So they go there. Let's note down some things underneath Ai. The first thing is that we want to see is the disobedience of Achan. The disobedience of Achan. So, at Jericho, they were supposed to take all of the treasures from the city and keep those for the Lord. And what that means literally is put them into the storehouses of the tabernacle. So any gold, any silver, any nice things, you take it and you save it, and it belongs to God. It belongs to the tabernacle, whatever complex, if you will. It belongs in the storehouses. So, and then everything else was supposed to be burnt. Well, Achan, of course, he went and took some gold and some silver and a Babylonish garment. So, let's think about this a little. What do you think he was going to do with those things? Do you think that he's going to just at any moment walk out of his tent in a Babylonish garment and everybody says, "Where'd you get that? How'd you come up with that?" Any thoughts on that? Why does he take it and hide it under his tent? Can he ever can he ever pull it out? Hold on. Don't just say no. Yes, he can at some point. At some point, he can pull them out. What?
After battle AI.
After some more battles. But for now, he has to hide it. They've only conquered Jericho, and they're supposed to have given everything over. So he hides it for now. Later on, when he comes back after some more victories, he's going to go under his tent, pull out this stuff, and walk out in his new threads. And everybody's going to say, "Wow, yeah, this came from Beth Shemesh, our battle over there." Or wherever. So he was going to lie about it. The gold and the silver, he's going to be the guy treating everybody to McDonald's because he's got all the money. So, okay. Anyway, so he's not a total fool in hiding it and waiting till later to pull it out and show off his riches. But either way, obviously, he wasn't supposed to do that. Next. So they're destroyed at Ai, the disobedience of Achan, and then the destruction of the children of Israel at Ai, which, of course, they had too few, they were overconfident, and they hadn't dealt with a major problem that they didn't take the time to figure out. Yes?
I was just wondering, kind of like, backtrack a little bit, do you think his wife would have known that he had taken?
Oh, good question. Well, let's save that for when they all get stoned, and then I'll bring that up. Why she and their children and everybody, including their dogs and cats, their animals, I don't know if they had dogs and cats, but they had animals, everything was destroyed. And we'll talk about that. So the city of Ai gains a temporary victory over the children of Israel. 36 men lose their lives. By the way, it looks like at Jericho, nobody lost their life. If they had the proper kind of following the Lord and perfect obedience, nobody died. I mean, that's unheard of, by the way. In the greatest of victories, the simplest of victories, there's always people that get hurt and killed. So what they always say is you're not trying to have no losses, you're trying to limit your losses. But not here. They had 0 losses if they did it the right way. So that's pretty amazing. But at Ai, of course, they had 36 people die. And so they take care of the problem in Joshua chapter 7. They committed the trespass, the accursed thing. They figure out who it is. I love trying to think through how they did all this. They used, the Bible says, the Urim and the Thummim. They used lots. It doesn't say the word Urim and Thummim. It says the word lots. They cast lots, and they identified the family. Okay, so is it the tribe of Judah or is it the tribe of Simeon? And by casting those lots, it landed on Judah. And then is it which family is it? This family or that family? And they cast lots and it landed on the right family. And can you imagine being Achan through this whole thing? Is God going to find me? Am I going to get away with this, or is God going to find me? And every time it's his family line, and it's getting closer and closer. Oh, I can just imagine the terror. At some point, about halfway through that, if that was me, I'd have jumped out and said, "Stop! It was me. I did it." And beg for forgiveness and mercy. But no, he doesn't do that. Anyway, it comes all the way down, and it picks his family and him as the trespasser. Okay, so that's, by the way, that's all in there. Verse 16, 17, 18. They brought his household man by man. Achan, verse 18, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah was taken. And Joshua said to Achan, "My son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel. Make confession. Tell me now what thou hast done. Hide it not from me." And Achan said, "Indeed, I have sinned. I saw these things. I saw them. I coveted them and took them. Isn't that something? That's the way it always goes. Your vision, your sight, you see something, you want it, covet, and then you take it. So what do you have to do? When you see something that you like but is wrong, you get your eyes off of it. That's how you stop that. Get your eyes off of it. And when you do that, the covetousness that desire will go away, and then the stealing, which is what this is, the robbing God. What does the Bible say? Will a man rob God? Yes. People do rob God, and some of us have robbed God, unfortunately. Anyway, so they sent messengers. They ran to the tent. There it was. They took it out of the midst of the tent, brought it to Joshua. So now the question that, when I need a name, I can't get a name. Kamaya, thank you. I have a brain block. When I need a name, I can't think of it. So the question that Kamaya asks, why mom and the children, right? That's what you're asking. Why were they all killed? What do you think? The whole family was put to death. Took Achan, verse 24, the silver, the garment of gold, the wedge of gold, his sons, his daughters, his oxen, his asses, his sheep, his tent, all that he had, they brought them into the valley of Achor, and raised up a great heap and burned it. Why the family? What do you think?
I think I've heard two different, to show everyone that your sin does affect other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so God went after his family as well, but also that maybe in some way, shape, or fashion, his wife did know and helped him in the hiding or covering up of it.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought on that? To me, the latter is probably true. Of course, Joshua, from his side of it, that's from God's side of it. God's the one who ordered this. But certainly they were in on it. I don't doubt that. The law specifically says, and I can't remember where, but the law specifically says that a child, a son or a daughter, shouldn't suffer for the sins of the parents. But in this case, the children are put to death. Why? They must have been in on it. And they must have known about it. So we don't know what he had. These infants. I don't know that he had infants. Maybe he just had teenagers. I have no idea. So sons and daughters were put to death with him. All right, so then they go back to Ai now, and I love the idea. David, by the way, who is also a great general, he follows the same pattern that God sets for Joshua. Says, hey, put out a small group of people out in front of the city like bait. Wouldn't you want to be a part of the bait crowd? No, that would not be fun. Look, when they come out, you start running as fast as you can. Get away from there. But then they'll see something happen, and they won't catch you, I promise. We'll get the fire going before they can catch you. And then you turn around and you start fighting, and then we'll collapse them in the middle. So I don't want to be a part of the bait crowd. So they put out the bait, and they have a huge group over behind the city around the hill. And as soon as the soldiers come rushing out, we're going to do the same thing we did last time. They go into the city and they start the city on fire. By the way, I recently came across this, and I've wondered this for years, and I think I finally figured it out. Sorry. It's making my mouth water. Mostly cities of that time, and for thousands of years, cities have been built of stone. Have you noticed that stone doesn't burn very well? So what would they do? How did they burn the city? Even their houses were largely made of stone. How do they do that? Any thoughts? Okay, you want me to tell you? Come back next week and find out. So what they do is, there was some wood, but with almost all of these kinds of cities that were burned, the soldiers would bring wood with them. And they'd cut down a bunch of trees around the city real quick, haul them inside, and put them up against the rocks and burn them. Why? What does great heat and fire do to stones? Huh? It cracks them. And then once they're cracked, they're useless to be reused. So if somebody's going to rebuild a city, they'll have to come back with new stones. Obviously a lot of work. And so you can effectively eliminate a city for a long period of time. Now there's still a great reason to come back to that same spot and rebuild another city on it. Why is that? What?
Built on top of it.
Yeah, you're getting higher up. The advantage is in being high over the surrounding valley and the armies that might surround your city. So there was a good reason to come back, but it would be very difficult to rebuild that city. It couldn't be done in a short amount of time for sure. They have to bring in a bunch of stone again. Anyway, that's just an interesting fact with that. So they burn Jericho, they burn Ai, and now the third place they're going to go to, of course, no, not yet, third place, not yet. After that, then they're also going to burn Hazor, but we'll get to Hazor in a little bit. All right, at this same time period, chapter 9, the Gibeonites, I call this the deception of the Gibeonites, and this I have underneath Ai. You can put it parallel to Jericho and Ai and the Gibeonites if you like. But this is a group of Canaanite people who, of course, you know the story. They dressed in old raggedy clothes and they got their bread all moldy. And they're from a couple miles away, literally a few miles away. And they come and they meet Joshua at the camp at Gilgal and say, "We are at your mercy. We traveled for many days. When we left home, this bread was fresh out of the oven, out of our stone hearth. But now it's old and moldy." Now think about how dumb that is, for one. Bread in those days was not full of yeast like we make it today. Bread was usually, if you were going to travel somewhere, you didn't put much yeast in your bread. It was very hard and dry, and it was flour, hardened flour, it was more than hardened flour, but not much, So it would last for a long time, and it would be sufficient. So there was no reason in the world for Joshua to believe this story, and he should have checked it out. He should have figured it out. Look, Joshua, you have spies. Your spies have gone different places. Joshua himself was a spy, should have checked out their story. But he didn't. He thought, again, he was overconfident. He said, "Oh, okay, we can make a deal with you." All right, now think about this. They said, "We're from far away and we want to be at peace with you." Why do you want to be at peace? You're far away. We're not interested in you if you're far away. It was really just absolutely not thought through at all, and definitely didn't ask the Lord about it, didn't pray about it. Joshua chapter 9. It's kind of a sad story because they're going to end up suffering from this story for years and years. So we'll see that much later on when we get there. So the Gibeonites, they were not supposed to make a league with the inhabitants of the land. Okay, so that was spoken to them numerous times. Anyway, I think it's in Deuteronomy chapter 11 or chapter 31 where they were warned not to make a league with the inhabitants of the land. And of course they break down here. Okay, so that's the central knock here, right down into the middle of Canaan. It's not all the way across. And so what happens at this point, both in the south and in the north, the cities that were there said, "Oh my goodness, we got to do something." Jericho went down quick. And by the way, you can see Jericho from a very long ways away, especially with a few spies. You come down here close to Masada, and you can easily see the smoke rising from Jericho looking up the valley, 30, 40 miles away. So these people down here, the word got out real quick, just like Rahab had the word about the coming of Israelites. Everybody knew about this group of mass invaders that were coming into the land, had a huge army, and their God opens up rivers and Red Seas for them to pass through. So they said, we got to do something quick. So in the south here, 31 kings joined together and said, let's build a huge confederacy and we're going to take on this group. Now, if you're Joshua and you're the children of Israel, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a large group, a big, huge army to fight, and if you win, you get rid of them all at once? Or would you rather go city to city to city to city to city, 31 major cities and their own king and everything, and defeat them individually? What do you think? That's a tough choice, maybe. Any thoughts?
The bigger city.
You want the bigger group? Well, when you know God's on your side, let's get the bigger group. Come on, buddy, bring it on, you know. So I really think this is God just making it simple for them. He brings them all together at once, and huge, you know, and of course this is where the story of the long day of the sun standing still. God made the sun stand still so they'd have a really long time to knock out the entire group at once and then not have to go city to city to city. All right, so this I'm calling the Southern Campaign, if I didn't give you that yet. Chapter 10, and this is what's known as the Amorite League or the Amorite Confederation. There's quite a mixture. There's Canaanites, there's Hittites, there's Amorites, but they're all Canaanites. You understand what I mean by that? So they all live in the land of Canaan, so the broad term is a Canaanite. So the leader of this Amorite League is a guy named, I won't ask you for this again, but his name is Adonizedek. Just like it sounds, Adonizedek, Adonizedek. So Adonizedek is the king at this little town called Jerusalem. Nobody knew anything much about Jerusalem at that point. It was nothing special. So, but anyway, so that's Jerusalem, and this 31 cities all scattered down into the valleys down here. It's known as the Shephelah. Anyway, so all these cities, and so they all joined together, but they come from the west. They joined together out here in the plains, out towards the Mediterranean, and then they attack from this side. Now, last time we were there, you land up here at Joppa, Haifa, Tel Aviv. There you go. And we drove in this main road all the way to Jerusalem on the first night when we got there. And these valleys down in here, Jerusalem's way up in the mountains. Now, I mean, the roads are like West Virginia, you know, really curvy and so on. But down here, there's some long open stretches. And our guide, when we're on the bus, he right away pointed out that you are in what's believed to be the valley of Beth Horon, which is this same area where this confederation met Joshua. So it's near Beth Horon and the valley where the sun stood still. So anyway, so they all join together and they all meet Joshua. Joshua comes and surprises them by night. Oh, surprise warfare. It is an unbelievably successful tactic. And generals, of course, throughout history have tried this, and it has worked. It's a psychological thing. You surprise the enemy, and they're not ready, and they go into disarray, and they panic, and everybody flees. And that's what happens, you know. So it happened with Goliath. It happened with Hazor. We'll see that in the next chapter, and so on. All right, so let's go to this discussion of the long day, chapter 10. Verse 9, here's where I find what I just said. Joshua therefore came up unto them suddenly. He surprised them. And went up from Gilgal all night, and the Lord discomfited them before Israel and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon and chased them along the way that goeth up to Beth Horon and smote them to Azekah, Azekah is a city mentioned right where the valley of Eli is, where Goliath was killed. So that's all the way down there. And Makkedah. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Beth Horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. They were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. That's not even fair. Right? It's not even fair. The God of heaven and earth fighting against you, it's not fair. It's almost as unfair as driving down 94, speeding, and you don't see a police car pull out, you see this big black truck. And all of a sudden there's lights coming on out of the inside of this big, beautiful truck. Like, that's not supposed to be a police. But see, that's very unfair too. It has never happened to me, I tell you. I know all of you are thinking that, because you know me, you're thinking that was me, but I'm not talking about myself. Okay. All right, so that's not fair either. Verse number 12. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, this is Joshua, commanding God, commanding the sun, Son, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed. Ooh, yes. Fun, fun, fun. Did the sun stand still? If the sun stood still, that means the sun's moving. This is not the time for a huge argument, Ben Decker. So he thought he was going to hide over there and just like, but no, I called him out. Anyway, so the sun stopped, or the earth stopped spinning, if you're one of those. So either way, boy, I'm doing a great job of just averting it. You know? Either way, the miraculous nature of this has to be one of the greatest miracles of the Bible. Okay? As much as the Red Sea is, no doubt, the Red Sea story, as it relates to man helping, is the greatest miracle, I think, in the Bible. But this has got to be right there with it. The sun standing still, or the earth stopping its spinning, the sun. So people who want to question the Bible, how is that possible? Okay, God, hello, right? God, in the beginning, God. That's how it's possible. But they want to figure out a physical human answer for this. And so they say that somehow there was an eclipse and the sun, the rays of the sun kind of seemed to be locked in place. And that it stayed light longer than normal. So, no. Yes, Ben?
That wouldn't explain in South America the legends and stuff of them having like longer night period.
So, on the other side of the world from there are legends that around this time period that there was a long night. Anyway, the sun stayed and the moon stayed. The moon stayed in the valley of Ajalon. Where'd you stay? Oh, I stayed in the dorm. Where'd the moon stay? In the valley of Ajalon. So, yes. Oh, I thought you had a question. All right, comment. All right, any other questions? Thoughts? I don't know. I'm kind of, I've heard very good arguments for both sides. I kind of lean more towards the idea that the sun revolves around the earth. But I've talked to scientists who say that's both sides, who say that's totally impossible. Scientifically, it doesn't work that way. So here's my simple answer. I believe it's a perspective thing. If I'm on the earth, it looks like the sun's rotating around the earth. If I'm on the sun, which I'm not, it looks like the earth is rotating around the sun. It's a matter of perspective. That's my answer. I know it's not a good answer, but that's my answer. Good? So if you want a great discussion on that, see Ben Decker. I'm teasing Ben. There's very strong arguments on that side of it. Third, the southern campaign then, by the way, this one ends, I should read to you some of this. So Joshua wipes them all out. I mean, he just goes to town on these guys. And some of the kings realize they've been beat, and they go hide in these caves. Where am I at? 16. 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. But where's the rest when they come out? There they are, verse 24. Came to pass when they brought out those kings unto Joshua, Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said to the captains of the men of war which went with him, Gentlemen, I have an object lesson to show you. Come look. And so they all gathered around for his object lesson. He said, Put your feet on the necks of these kings. And they said, Oh, okay. That's an interesting object lesson. And they did, and they put their feet upon the necks of them. And Joshua said to them, Fear not, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for thus shall the Lord do to all your enemies against whom ye fight. And afterward Joshua smote them and slew them and hanged them on 5 trees, and they were hanging upon the trees until the evening. So, very nice object lesson there. All right, so the rest of the chapter is him cleaning up, and they all return back to Gilgal. Cleaning up, okay. And returning back to Gilgal, this southern confederation. Chapter 11 then, the northern confederacy. And this would be under Jabin, king of Hatzor. Yes?
So when they killed the kings and everything, what happened to the families and cities? Did they go to the cities as well?
They would have gone to each of those cities, yes. But now those cities, I mean, the Bible doesn't give us these details, but it does say that they smote them and all the souls that were therein. So they went and wiped out these cities. What's the military word for that when somebody is, it's not eliminated. They eliminate the threat. That's a very nice way of saying it, right? So that's what they're doing here. They're eliminating all the threats. So, okay, Jabin, king of Hazor. Now, I'd love to have more time to show you some things at Hazor. I've been there several times. Unbelievable, huge place. And what they have since discovered, only about 15 years ago. And our first real guide in Israel, his name is Eitan Chamberlain, he got his doctor's degree in some area of archaeology, and he did his internship, his digging at Hazor. So he absolutely loves Hazor. So this last trip, he wasn't our guide, but he did meet us at Hazor, and he gave us the tour of Hazor, which he's the best. He's the absolute best. So he did a phenomenal job, and he's a great guy. But anyway, he took us through Hazor, and one of the great things there, right on the top of the hill, the old tell, is this massive structure with huge stone walls, and a lot of it has been kind of reassembled. And there's large areas that are completely, let me just say it this way. So we're standing in this area where it obviously used to be this large temple, and he had described how it was set up and what he found as he's digging, and he kind of motions. There was 40 of us in this group in 2009 when we were over there, and he said, "Come here, stand around." And so we were standing there, and he takes his foot. Now the dirt was a solid tan, and just dirt, and it's real dry in that area, and it's all solid brown dirt. And he takes his foot and he starts rubbing it, and he did that a couple of times, and it instantly turned black. It was soot, a huge layer of soot. What's soot from? Burning. What does the Bible say happened at Hazor? It was burned. This monster, this huge temple, he said, we found these massive, huge beams, posts down into the ground. All of it was burnt, but just a huge round soot going down about 15 feet into the ground. It was obviously a post. Dug away the dirt from that, and he described how they dug out this temple. And all of the stones all the way around, you can find pictures of this, look it up, Hazor Temple, cracked stones. All the foundation stones in this place are just completely shattered. And the only thing that can do that is heat. It was burned, and the Bible says that when they conquered it, verse 13, Israel burned none of the other cities save Hazor only. Verse 11, chapter 11, verse 11, and he burnt Hazor with fire, Hatzor. So, Hazor is one of the largest archaeological sites, other than Jerusalem, Temple Mount proper. Hazor is the largest city being excavated in Israel. It's like a 112-acre plot. Now, about 70 of those acres is pretty much a field. But that used to be the lower city. And on and on. There's just amazing things. The upper city, you can see these huge stairways that used to come from the lower city up to the temple area. And the massive bulwarks around the entire lower city. You know, it's pretty far out, way out as far as you can see almost on the city itself. Out in the middle of the lower city, I remember there was a bunch of green grass sticking up out of, and there was obviously something there. And our guide, Eitan, said that is a hole in the ground. When they were excavating here, they wondered what that was, and they went out and they found this hole in the ground. And they opened it up, they went down inside this hole, went down, 20, 30 feet, and it connected to a tunnel. And lo and behold, it's a long story, but lo and behold, that tunnel extends for at least a mile out to this old ancient synagogue that they found. Of course, it was built after the days of Christ. Synagogue, anyway, I think it was a Catholic church, actually, if I remember right. So it had been much later. But still, there was a tunnel to the bottom of Hazor. Now, and of course, Hazor originally, when some point in their history, when they were a very powerful city, they probably built that tunnel as an escape route if anybody ever breached the walls of the city, that they could go down that tunnel and escape. And they said they found rooms down there with silverware and food containers and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was stocked to the gills in case of being captured. So Hazor, the point is, Hazor is a very powerful city. They had chariots. Jabin, king of Hazor, had chariots. I mean, this is a very powerful place. And Joshua makes them like mincemeat. So watch what he does. Let's go to chapter 11 there. Verse 7. Verse 6. The Lord said to Joshua, be not afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time will I deliver them into all up slain before Israel. Thou shalt hold their horses. You're going to chop up their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So Joshua came and all the people of war with him against the waters of Merom, here it is, suddenly. And they fell upon them. Now hold on. How do you do that? Here's where this is at. You can't see it here, but in this little valley, it's miles wide still, but in this valley, it's called the Hula Valley. And it's a part of this same Jordan Valley. It goes right up against Mount Hermon. And Hazor is right at the north end of this little valley. So here's what Joshua does. The Bible mentions Chinnereth here. That's the Sea of Galilee. He comes up to Chinnereth, and here at the Sea of Galilee, instead of heading up the valley, he heads out into the hills. And when he meets the army, these northern armies, in the valley where their chariots are going to be useful, chariots aren't useful in the mountains, he comes out of this side by night in the first crack of dawn. he shocks them, and they're literally right up on the edge of the mountains. They were expecting him to come up the valley and face them head on or something. And they surprise them. They get all the way up in here. That would have been a full night's march. I mean, this is miles. And marched all the way up in the hills, surprised them by morning, and the rest, I mean, it was quick work from there. They all panicked, and all the, I'm sure they caught the chariots empty, you know, as far as like catching fighter jets empty, you know. They're great and useful if you can get them with, you know, with people in them, but these chariots, they were empty. Anyway, they just totally shocked them and destroyed them in a very short amount of time, literally less than a day. Okay, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel. He chased them all over the place. Joshua did unto them as the Lord bade him. He hoed their horses and burnt their chariots with fire. And Joshua at that time turned back and took Hazor, smote the king. Hazor was the head of all those kingdoms. That's my point. It's a very powerful city, large city. I forget what they say, but I mean, some of these cities, you know, were very small, a couple thousand people. Not Hazor. Hazor was probably in the tens of thousands, easy, quite a few tens of thousands. I forget what they say. It might be even 100,000. I forget, but but they're in a huge valley. There's a huge ecosystem all around them to support this massive city, and so on. Okay, so that's the three main: central, south, north. Make sure you know that. All right, now, the last chapters won't take me so long. I want to finish Joshua in the few minutes that we have left. So chapters 13 through 24, this is called claiming the land. So they enter the land, they conquer the land, and now it's time to claim the different portions of land. And so obviously they're going to split it up into what? Tribal areas, yes. They're going to split it up into the tribes. And so in chapters 12 through 24, this is really the idea of when they're claiming the land. So the first section that I want to look at here, and we're going to look at 5 main points here underneath this section. So the first is the division of Canaan. The division of Canaan. Dividing the land. Hoo-wee. This would not have been a fun job, by the way. It's no wonder, and it was to be expected, and it happened. Children of Israel, the tribes, had all kinds of jealousies and long-standing hatred, bitterness towards each other based upon their land areas. It's just the way it was going to be. So imagine if you, in one family of brothers and sisters, about the size of my family, let's say 10 children, and you take a very wealthy father, which my father's not, and he's going to divide the inheritance up. There's always, or often, there's squabbling over that. Well, especially in this case, because it's not just his sons, it's entire tribes of people with tens of thousands of people. And so everybody had their own opinions about what should and shouldn't be. And so the Lord does this kind of simply. They sent spies, if you will, out into the land. They sent surveyors out into the land. And they went all over the place, all over the land of Canaan, and they divided it into sections. From the side of this hill to this place, to the Jordan River. And so they divided up the entire land, and then when they had a plot, or what they called a lot, a section of land, then they would decide by the Urim and the Thummim, casting lots, who it was going to go to. And so this obviously is chosen of God. God said, I want Judah to have Jerusalem. You getting those pictures passed around? Are they working their way over? So this took God's direct hand in sending the tribes to where they were supposed to go. All right, does anybody remember? There's at least one of the tribes that was very, very unhappy with their plot that they received, and so they actually moved the entire tribe. Does anybody remember that? Dan? Do you remember where they moved to? No? Okay. What?
Didn't they move to the other side of Jordan?
No, they didn't. They were down here close to the Philistines. Who's a famous person from the tribe of Dan? Samson. What's that? Dan? This is Bible college. And we discuss very deep things around here. So, when we ask questions about who is from the tribe of Dan, that's the kind of answers we get. Dan. Okay, that was good. That was good. Samson was from the tribe of Dan, and it was sometime after the days of Samson when, of course, remember Samson and all his interactions with the Philistines. They were right down here close to the Philistines, and they were very unhappy with their land. Why were they unhappy with their land? You remember? Because they could not conquer it. That's what the Bible says. Now, that's not because God didn't help them. That's because they thought they couldn't. We can't do it. Those people down there, they have chariots and they're in the valleys. And we want the valleys, but we can't have them. So what do we have to do? We just sit here and mope about it. And in fact, they ended up moving. They left here. They moved all the way to the north, all the way out of, okay, they did cross the Jordan, but it's way up here. And they moved completely out of that land and took a different land. And a city called Laish, they move up there, and they all of a sudden became he-men. And they conquered Laish, and the Bible says they killed everybody, women and children and everybody. Wow, congratulations. Why don't you do that down here? So they conquer this city, they move up there, and then, of course, that would become a real stumbling block to the tribe of Dan. They were too far apart, and they would become too distant. So they end up building their own altar and their own gods and all this kind of stuff. So, is there more pictures? Okay, pass those on around. Okay, so the division of Canaan. So there's some general things. Oh, I got to mention one more thing. There's one guy who received his property that he'd been trying to get for many years. Who? Caleb. Caleb gets, what was the name of the town, the mountain that he wanted? He said, I want that mountain. Can we have everybody's attention up here again? So what's that? What town was it? What city? Hebron. That's correct. Kirjath Arba. City of Arba. The family man name, the name of the family that lived there, his name is Arba. And they were, of course, sons of Anak, which meant they were giants. So, and Caleb says, when he's 85, he says, I'm as strong as I was in the day when I was 45. Let's go. And so the old man leads them into battle. They conquer Hebron. And then of all things, my next point is going to show this, but of all things, Hebron becomes a city of refuge, and Caleb gives it away. But you didn't know that. Some of you didn't know that. He gets the mountain that he always wanted, and he gave it to the Lord. He just wanted to conquer it. He wanted to prove that he's as strong as he is at 85, as he thinks he is at 45. Next, so the division of Canaan. Secondly, the cities of refuge. Let's go quickly. The cities of refuge, chapter 20 of Joshua. Okay, on the western side, did we already discuss last semester a little bit about cities of refuge, right?
Yes.
Right. So let me just touch on this. On the western, this is the western side. There are 3 cities, Kadesh Naphtali, what's the next one? Shechem, and Hebron down to the south, which is where Caleb had conquered that mountain. On the east side, there is Bezer to the north, Ramoth, Gilead, and then Golan, somewhere over in here. So those 3 cities. So 6 total cities of refuge. Those 6 cities of refuge are all priestly Levitical cities because the Levites didn't receive an actual plot of land, per se, a tribe where they lived together. They received cities, and they were scattered all over the land of Israel. How many? That's not our time yet. How many Levitical cities were there total? Anybody remember? 48. 48. 6 of the 48 were also cities of refuge. All the cities of refuge were also Levitical cities. So what does that tell you? That tells that the cities of refuge had Levites who became judges and determined right from wrong and who was right in the disagreements that people had, which is why they were the cities of refuge. Okay, so the cities of refuge. Number 3, Levi's portion, chapter 21. I just told you this. So there were 48 cities of the Levites. And so they are scattered among the tribes. They're scattered among the tribes. Okay, the land is conquered. There was 2.5 tribes that had gone into the land with them and helped them conquer. Now those 2.5 tribes, their men folk, were going to go back to the east side of the Jordan. So on their way back to the other side, to their homes, they said, wait a second, we're going to leave the land of Canaan proper and cross at the Jordan River. Why don't we, by the Jordan River, put up this huge altar? And then nobody will ever forget that we're also a part of them. And as soon as they build that altar, these people on the west side see this altar, but nobody communicated. They forgot to send them an email or a text. And lo and behold, these guys take up arms. They gather their entire armies together, ready to go to battle against the 2.5 tribes on this side, thinking that they had already built up some false god altars. Should have never happened. They should have sent the email. They forgot. No, I'm teasing. They should have never gone to this side of the Jordan. They should have stayed there. The whole purpose of the tabernacle is to bring everybody together, to keep everybody together, unity among the tribes. If there's a big river, I know it's to us it's not big, but if there's a river separating these tribes, there's going to be nothing but trouble. And it was. So I call this 4th, did I name it to you? The altar of witness. The altar of witness. They named it, they finally got things settled when everybody got on the same page. Everybody got off their high horses. And they called it Ed. Ed. Real deep theological name, almost like Dan. And they called it Ed. What does the name Ed mean? Witness. It's the altar of witness. It's a witness between us and you that we're the same blood. We're the same families. We're the same tribes. We're going to be together. That's this altar of witness. All right, and then last thing. Very last main point here underneath claiming of the land still is the farewell of Joshua. Chapters 23 and 24. And so he gathers a bunch of people together at Shiloh, and then again at Shechem. See, that's interesting. Shechem, that would later be Samaria. That would later be the Samaritan religion that was founded there as an equivalent, they believed, to Jerusalem. But it's interesting that Joshua didn't meet at Jerusalem. He met at Shechem. And so those people there, they always have had an argument, even if they're wrong. Remember the woman at the well? She said, your fathers worshipped in Jerusalem, mine worshipped in this mountain at Shechem. Well, they were all supposed to worship at Jerusalem. But the first time they ever met together as all the tribes for worship was at Shechem. And that takes place under Joshua after the land is settled. By the way, did Joshua conquer every city in the whole land of Canaan? No, not even close. It was the tribe's jobs to go out and conquer every city. He knocked out all of the main opposition. Okay, and then Joshua, he would end up dying. At the end of Joshua, then in chapter 24, we read about his death. We read about Joseph's burial. Joseph. A couple hundred years earlier, Joseph died in Egypt. They mummified his body and they brought it with them. And all this time in the wilderness, somebody is carrying Joseph's mummy. And now, when they settle down, they finally bury his body, his mummy. Okay, not his mommy, his mummy. So that's for Kamaya. Just make sure she gets it. And then they also buried Eleazar, which is the next high priest after Aaron. So it was Aaron and then Eleazar, his son. Eleazar also died. So that's the second high priest now that is dead and gone, and of course his son would take over. Okay, so Joseph, Joshua, Eleazar. All right, Joshua's finished. We'll move on to Judges in our next class.